Alright, now I'm going to show you how to make a delicious Alfredo sauce. Everybody's always scared about Alfredo sauce. It's too much butter, heavy cream. It's actually very simple to make. You don't have to use the heavy cream and you don't have to use real butter. First you want to get your water started. I got about a gallon of water in a pot. I'm going to add some salt, quite a bit of salt, because this is the main flavoring that the pasta is going to get. So you want a good amount of salt in your water. Then you get it going. That's all done. Now, to start your Alfredo sauce, you're going to get your burner going on like a medium-high heat. You're going to add 6 tablespoons of butter or margarine. I'm using margarine. You add a half of a medium-sized onion, fine chopped. Now you're going to let the butter melt and you're going to let the onion sweat a little bit. Now sweating is not, it's just a technical term. All it means is you want it to get not burned, you want it to get it slightly translucent so you can kind of see through it. Only take a couple of minutes. Once the butter melts, I'm going to keep it going. Adjust your heat so you don't burn your onions. You got to remember, it's a white sauce, so you want everything to be nice and white. Now it looks like a lot of butter, but we're going to use the butter as a thickener as well. We're going to add flour to the butter and make what's called a roux. And when we get to that, you're going to make sure that you want to have a white roux. You don't want it to turn brown, and because it'll develop a nutty flavor and it'll make your sauce brown. We don't want that. We want a nice, clean, white sauce. Let that sit and cook for about 2 minutes. Now you want to make sure you don't burn your butter. You got to stir it and stir it and stir it. You want to extract as much flavor as you can out of the garlic and the onion without burning it. Adjust your heat. Make sure you scrape the sides and the bottom corners. You don't want anything in there to burn. You don't want any brown. Brown is bad in Alfredo. I'll explain. We have 6 tablespoons of flour, just regular all-purpose flour, to the 6 tablespoons of butter. They have to be an even amount to make the roux. I'm also going to use about 3 tablespoons of what's called caciocavallo cheese. Now, that's a very kind of expensive cheese, but it's really good. You can use Romano or Parmesan or whatever you prefer, but you need about 3-4 tablespoons of it to add to your sauce. And then we have 4 cups of 2% milk. You don't have to use heavy cream. If you want, you can, but heavy cream tends to separate and burn during the cooking process. So you're better off using a milk, either a whole milk or a 2%. Do not use skim milk. There's too much water in it and it'll ruin your sauce. 2% or whole milk. Always remember that. Alright, our onions are starting to transform and the garlic is blooming. That just means that it's releasing its flavors and its aromas. So they're turning slightly yellow and getting soft. Now they're getting, the thinner cut ones are actually getting opaque and clear. Now you're going to turn your heat way down. You want barely hardly any heat. Because when you add the flour, you're going to have to stir it and stir it and stir it like crazy so you don't burn it. Just dump it in. Now it's going to pull together like a paste. This is one of the reasons you turn the fire way down. And you're going to have to cook this for about a minute to 2 minutes, depending on how hot your stove is. But you don't want it to brown. As soon as you start smelling a nutty flavor, you went too far. Now, brown roux are good for other things like jambalayas and soup. But for a blonde, you want what's called a blonde roux. That's what you want for your Alfredo. You got to constantly stir it and mix it, or it will burn real fast. You just want to cook the flour a little bit, get that floury, pasty taste. Now, if you like garlic, the flavor of garlic, you can add more. If you really don't like it too much, you can add less, but you can't. You need the garlic. You cannot leave it out. Now it's coming together real well. See how dry it's getting? That's because the flour is absorbing all the butter and the margarine, which I use margarine. The butter is too rich. Plus, most people complain about the cost of butter, so it's okay to use margarine that I always use. Okay, we're at the point now where it's pasty. It's like the consistency of like Elmer's glue paste. I'm just starting to get the smell, a slight nutty smell. You add your milk. You have to put your spatula down and get yourself a whip. You got to mix it really well because you want to break up that roux to help that thicken. That's your thickening agent. It's going to help make your sauce nice and thick and stick to your pasta. Now that the milk is introduced, you have to turn your heat down. You definitely want medium-low. You don't want to scorch your milk. Now it seems incredibly thin right now, but as it cooks, it will thicken. Adjust your heat. Heat control is the main thing when making an Alfredo sauce. So you do not want to scorch your milk, but you do want to cook it because it'll finish cooking the roux and the rest of the vegetables and herbs, the onion and the garlic. And you don't add your cheese until right near the end when you're almost done. Once your pasta's cooked, always make sure that you have everything that you need ready at the time when you start. Make sure your strainer is in your sink, or if you have a pot that has a strainer in it, make sure that it's ready to go. Because once you start, there is no stopping. You have to make sure. It's called mise en place. French came up with it. It just means having everything ready. A lot of cooks, they get distracted and everything else. Oh, I got to run and go and answer the phone. I got to get something else out of the fridge. You need to make sure that you have everything you need before you start. Because once you start, there is no stopping. You have to pay attention to what you're doing. Stir your sauce probably once a minute or once every other minute because you want to make sure it doesn't stick. Get down in the corners. and mix well. Do not use a food blender or a stick mixer because that'll add too much air to your milk. You don't want frothy milk. You just want heavy milk. We have our tray of fresh pasta that we made. Out of that recipe that I gave you before, it makes about 1.5 pounds to 2 pounds, depending on what kind of pasta you're making and how thick you're going to make it. But you have to have that all ready to go. Have yourself a set of tongs to stir. Don't stir your pasta with a spoon because you'll break it all up. And if it doesn't look perfect like what you buy in the store, that's because they've got a big giant machine that makes it all exactly perfect. People prefer the imperfections because then they know it's actually handmade and there was effort and love put into making it. Okay, now my water's coming up to a boil, so I'm going to turn the heat up on the sauce so I can get it to cook faster. And it'll start to thicken very shortly. Be very careful. Always open away from you so the steam escapes away from you so you don't burn yourself. Take your fresh pasta, and as you drop it in, drop it away from you so you don't splash yourself with boiling water. Once it's in, give it a light movement. It's sitting on your tray, it kind of dried up a little bit and it all sticks together. So you got to give it a little break. Now, the agitation of the boiling water will help with that. And you can see the yellow film on top of your white sauce. That means that your butter and your flour are finally coming to a cook. Let's stir it up real well. Set your timer for 2.5 minutes for your pasta. Always set a timer. Don't ever think that you can just do it by eye because it'll overcook and taste terrible. Pasta stir. Now real pasta explodes when you cook it. If you notice, I didn't put all of it in. I put about 1 pound of it in. And the pound dry is going to equal about 1.5 pounds to 2 pounds cooked because it's going to double in thickness as the flour absorbs the water. Unlike store-bought pasta. If you see any pieces sticking together, pull them apart softly. Now it's easy for me because being a chef, my fingers can take the heat. Most people might not want to do that, but you have to break your pasta up so it all cooks evenly. Now I haven't put any salt or pepper in here yet because the margarine has salt in it. There's salt in the pasta water, but you don't salt and pepper it until you get to the end, and then you salt and pepper it to your personal tastes. Plus the cheese that you use depends on how much salt you're going to put in it as well. Romano is very salty, and so is Parmesan. Now, Caciocavallo is not very salty. It is salty, but not as salty as the others. So you really have to watch your salt. That'll melt in there really nicely and help it to thicken. Make sure you scrape the bottom real well every time you stir it. You want the corners and the bottom. Stir your pasta. So always stirring, always moving. And there's our pasta. Now, after 2.5 minutes, we take out a piece, set it down. Then we have to taste it and test it. And you want it to be cooked all the way through, but to where when you break it, you don't see a white part in the middle of it, because that means that it's uncooked. Well, see, that's cooked. It's not. There's no white hard piece in the middle. That's al dente. Now you just take it carefully so you don't burn yourself. Pour it away. Stand back and let the heat out. Drain as much water as you can from it. Put it back in the same pot. Take some good olive oil. Just a little bit, about 2 tablespoons maybe. Tablespoon and a half. 2 tongs. Toss it in so the noodles won't stick to each other while you finish your sauce now. Alright, now my sauce is starting to get thick. One way to test the thickness is to dip something in and wipe it. When you get a strand like that, that means your sauce is thick enough and ready enough. Now you just turn it off. It'll continue to cook. It'll continue to thicken. Take your pasta, generous portion. Add your cream sauce generously. Finish with a little fresh parsley. This is Italian flat leaf parsley, chopped very fine. And there you are.